It is finally that time of year again. The Africa Cup of Nations and the AFC Asian Cup is officially back on for the next month. In today's video, I'm going to be predicting which teams I think will be advancing out of the group stages and which teams might get eliminated. Obviously, I would have rather made two separate videos for both of these competitions, but sadly I didn't have enough time. So I thought I'm going to make one big video where I'm going to be predicting who will advance from the group stages in both of these separate competitions. If you guys want to see more AFCON and Asian Cup predictions for the round of 16, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, let me know in the comments down below. But without further ado, let's get right into this video. Starting off with the Africa Cup of Nations, in Group A, we have Equatorial Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Ivory Coast, and Nigeria. I think this is a very interesting group because there's obviously two main powerhouses in Group A, and that is Ivory Coast and Nigeria. Both of these teams are absolutely incredible, but for me, I do think Nigeria are the stronger of the two. If you look at their attack, I think they have one of the best international attacking lineups in the whole world, with players like Victor Boniface, Victor Osimhen, Samuel Chukwueze, Moses Simon, Ademola Lookman, Iheanacho. They have so many incredible attackers, and I do think that with this insane attack that they have, they will be able to finish first place in this group. But obviously, Ivory Coast are still a very strong team in the AFCON, and I do think that they are definitely favorites to get second place in this group. Sadly, for the other two teams in this group, I don't think they are at the same level as both Nigeria and Ivory Coast. But I do think Guinea-Bissau are the better of the two teams, and I do think they will finish in third place, and Equatorial Guinea will probably finish in last place. Moving on to Group B, we have Cape Verde, Egypt, Ghana, and Mozambique. Again, this is another very tough group, and there are two standout teams, Egypt and Ghana. Obviously, we all know how incredible of a team Egypt is, and even throughout history, they have always been a very powerful team in any AFCON competition. But you can never rule out Ghana because they have produced some incredible talent in recent years, and I do think they are also a very strong team. But sadly for them, in recent games, they haven't been performing that good. They just recently lost to Comoros, who they should have definitely beaten, and they also recently lost against Mexico and the USA. So for that reason, I do think Egypt are more likely to finish in first place, and Ghana will probably finish in second place. Finishing in third place, I do think that Cape Verde will take the spot over Mozambique, which is a little bit surprising considering they're such a small country. But for being that small of a country, they do produce a lot of good talent. And for that reason, I have them finishing in third place and Mozambique finishing in last place. Moving on to Group C, and again, another very tough group. We have Cameroon, Gambia, Guinea, and Senegal. Obviously, Senegal are the current AFCON champions, as in their last competition, they did beat Egypt in the final via penalties as they won 4-2. And I do think in general, they probably have one of the strongest team in this tournament. If you look at their goalkeeper in Edouard Mendy, and even their defensive players, their midfielders, and especially their forwards, they have a lot of quality players in every single position. And they have a lot of players that play in very high quality leagues. You see a lot of Senegalese players in the Premier League, in the Serie A, and even in the Bundesliga. So for that reason, I do think they are definitely favorites to finish in first place. Now, I'm not ruling off Cameroon because I do think they still have a very good team, and they are currently ranked 46th place in the FIFA men's ranking. But I think within recent years, their team has really fallen off. If you look at Cameroon in the early 2000s, they were always ranked between 10 and 20 by FIFA, and they were definitely the best African nation. But in recent years, I don't think they have been as strong. But I still do think they will qualify out of the group stages, finishing in second place. Finishing in third place, I do think will be Guinea, because no, they don't have as good players as Senegal or Cameroon, but they still have a few quality players. And I do think in their match against the Gambia, I do think they will be able to win, putting them in third place. And sadly for Gambia, I do think they will get knocked out of this group. Moving on to Group D, we have Algeria, Angola, Burkina Faso, and Mauritania. We all know how good Algeria is. They are one of the best teams in the AFCON, and they are a very strong team in the world of football. In recent years, Algeria have had a lot of quality players playing in the top leagues in Europe, and especially if you look in the Premier League with players like Riyad Mahrez, they do have a very good squad. I think this is probably the easiest choice so far, that I do think Algeria will finish in first place. In second place, I will probably go with Burkina Faso. I do think they have a very underrated squad. A lot of people look at them like they are not a very good team, but in recent years, they have been producing a lot of good talent. And if you look at in their recent game where they beat DR Congo, I do think they definitely have a good chance to make it out of this group, and I think they will finish in second place. In third place, I do think will be Angola, and a little bit of a surprising one, I do think Mauritania will get knocked out in last place. Moving on to Group E, we have Mali, Namibia, South Africa, and Tunisia. I think Tunisia are one of the best African nations. We saw what they did in the World Cup, where they beat France 1-0, and they also drew against Denmark. They played incredibly in that competition, and yes, although they didn't make it far, they still showed how quality their team is. In second place, I do think will be Mali. Obviously, South Africa are still a good team, and if you remember them in the early 2000s and early 2010s, they were actually probably one of the stronger teams in Africa. But I do think Mali are the better team in the current moment, and for that reason, I do think they will finish in second. I think South Africa will finish in third, and sadly for Namibia, I don't think they have any chance in this group, and I do think they will get knocked out. Finally, moving on to Group F, we have DR Congo, Morocco, Tanzania, and Zambia. Morocco are definitely the favorites in this group, and I do think they are the best African nation this year. Do you guys remember what Morocco did in the World Cup? They finished in 4th place, and that's not only African nations, that's the whole world. They finished in 4th place. I think they're an incredible team, and if you remember what they did in that World Cup, they beat some of the best nations in the world. They beat Belgium, they beat Portugal, they beat Spain, they drew against Croatia, and they were so close to getting that 3rd place medal. But in this AFCON competition, I definitely think that they are the best team, and they will 100% finish in 1st place in this group. Second place is a little bit harder because I think both DR Congo and Zambia both have a good chance to make it into 2nd place. But I do think DR Congo has the better players. I think they have more well-known players, and I think they're definitely a more established nation in terms of football ability. So for that reason, I do think Congo will finish in 2nd place. Zambia will probably finish in 3rd place, and sadly for Tanzania, I do think they will finish in 4th place. And that is it for all my AFCON group stage predictions. These are the teams that I think will advance to the next round, and the teams which I think will get eliminated. But with that being said, let's move right on to the AFC Asian Cup. Starting off in Group A, we have China, Lebanon, Qatar, and Tajikistan. I've been hearing a lot of people say that Qatar will finish 1st place in this group, because obviously they did play in the last World Cup, and although they had one of the worst World Cup performances by a host nation that we've ever seen throughout history, they still are a good team, and the fact that they still showed confidence against some of the big teams that they had to verse tells you a lot about their nation. But I think China are actually going to finish 1st place in this group. Like I already said, I know a lot of people will choose Qatar over China to finish in 1st place, but with China being such a big country with their incredible population, I do think they have a lot of good talent and a lot of underrated talent. And if you look in the Chinese league, there are a lot of very good Chinese players that most people don't know about. So for that reason, I do think China will finish in 1st place. Finishing in 2nd place, like I already mentioned, I do think it will be Qatar. They have that World Cup experience from last year, and I do think that coming into this competition, they will feel very confident, and I do think that they will definitely advance out of this group. Finishing in 3rd place, I have put Lebanon. Lebanon are a pretty good country. They have a few quality players, but nothing comparable to both China and Qatar. So I do think Lebanon will finish in 3rd place. And sadly for Tajikistan, they're not really a footballing nation in the sense that some of these other nations are, and I do think they will finish in last place. Moving on to Group B, we have Australia, India, Syria, and Uzbekistan. Obviously, Australia aren't originally part of the AFC, but obviously they are much better than some of the other teams they have to verse in their region. So for that reason, they are a part of the AFC. And I do think that in this group, they will definitely finish in 1st place. Similarly to Morocco, we saw during the World Cup that Australia are a very strong nation, and they actually surprisingly made it out of their group as they beat both Tunisia and also Denmark. Now, obviously, they did get knocked out in the round of 16 by the eventual World Cup winners Argentina. But even in that game, they still scored a goal and they put up a good fight. So coming out of that competition, coming into the AFC Asian Cup, I do think they are probably one of the better teams in this competition, and I think they will definitely make it out 1st place in this group. This may be a pretty unpopular choice as India probably have a lot of football fans, but I think Uzbekistan have shown in recent years that there are a few really good players on their team, very underrated players. We've seen the likes of Shomurodov. So for that reason, I do think Uzbekistan will finish in second place. In third place, I do have Syria. And in fourth place, sadly, I think India will get knocked out, which is kind of crazy considering the population of that country. But their football team still isn't the greatest. And in this group, I do think they will probably finish in last place. Moving on to Group C, we have Hong Kong, Iran, Palestine, and UAE. Obviously, Iran is a very big country, and throughout history, they have been notoriously one of the best countries in that Middle East area in terms of football ability. And they have been very good in recent AFC competitions, and in this competition, I do think they will make it out of the group stage, finishing in first place. With the likes of Mehdi Taremi at their striker position, I do think he will be able to bag a few goals in probably each of these games, and I think they will pretty comfortably finish in first place. In second place, this is difficult because I think it's between Palestine and UAE. Obviously, Palestine are the older footballing nation, but in recent years, we've seen UAE produce some top talent, as obviously they're trying to incorporate themselves a lot more in the footballing world. So for that reason, I actually think UAE will beat Palestine into second place, and I think Palestine will get third place. They still have a chance to make it out of the group stages, but I don't think they will secure their advancement like UAE will. And sadly for Hong Kong, obviously they are a small country, and in terms of their footballing ability, they aren't the best. So for that reason, I think they will probably finish in last place. Moving on to Group D, we have Indonesia, Iraq, Japan, and Vietnam. Who remembers Japan during the World Cup? Because I certainly do. And I remember that they were in one of the toughest groups with Germany, Costa Rica, and Spain. And most people thought that they were definitely going to get eliminated out of this group. But surprisingly, they ended up beating Germany, they ended up beating Spain, and they did advance out of the group stages. Obviously, in the next round, they did end up losing to Croatia on penalties. But that just shows you how incredible of a team Japan are for beating Spain, beating Germany, and drawing in full time with Croatia, who did end up finishing in third place. I think Japan are probably the favorites to win this whole competition. I do think they are the best Asian nation, and I think in this group, they will easily get first place. But who will get second place in this group is a little bit of a tough one, because between Indonesia and Iraq, I don't really know who's going to get second place. Obviously, Indonesia are ranked higher by FIFA than Iraq are, but I actually think that Iraq will upset Indonesia and they will end up finishing in second place. Indonesia, I think, will definitely finish in third place, and sadly for Vietnam, they've never really been a great footballing nation. They are starting to get better in recent years, but in this group, I do think they will finish in fourth place. Moving on to Group E, we have Bahrain, Jordan, Malaysia, and South Korea. Again, similar to the last group, South Korea are definitely the best team out of these three other nations, and I think they are probably, similar to Japan, one of the favorites to win this whole competition. If you look about 10 years ago, South Korea weren't actually that good, and they were ranked around 69th by FIFA. But if you look in recent years, they have moved up all the way to 23rd ranking by FIFA, and I think they are an incredible footballing nation. In second place, I actually think that Bahrain will finish above Jordan. If you look back about 10 years ago, they were ranked very, very low by FIFA. But in the last 10 years, they have been rising steadily to a pretty good nation in the Asian competitions. Now, obviously, they're not anything special like some of the other teams like Japan or South Korea are, but they are still a pretty good nation, and I do think they will advance out of this group. In third place, I do think will be Jordan. They still have a chance to advance, but I don't think it's very likely. And in fourth place, I think will be Malaysia. And finally, moving into the last group in the AFC Asian Cup, we have Kyrgyzstan, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and Thailand. Obviously, the winner of this group will be Saudi Arabia. In recent years, the rise in the Saudi Arabian national team and in the Saudi Pro League has been exponential. They have been one of the fastest rising teams in all of the world. And if you remember, in the World Cup, they only won one game, but that one game was against the eventual World Cup winners, Argentina. They beat them in the group stages, and that was an incredible match. Now, obviously, Saudi Arabia, I don't think are as good as some of the other nations in this competition, but they do have a few really quality players, and with football really growing in their country, I do think in the future they could be a very strong team in the AFC competitions. I think the other three teams in this group are definitely not at the same level as Saudi Arabia. But I do think Oman are probably the best out of the other three. So I think they will probably finish in second place. I think probably Kyrgyzstan will finish in third place. And obviously that means that Thailand sadly will end up finishing in last place. They obviously don't have a lot of history with football, and for that reason I do think they will get knocked out. And that is the end of this video. Oh my gosh, this took so long to record because I had to predict 2 competitions in one video. Obviously I would have rather made this into 2 separate videos, but sadly I didn't have enough time, and I thought one video is better than nothing, so I just decided to squeeze them all into one video. If you guys want to see more AFCON and Asian Cup predictions for the round of 16, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, or even the finals, let me know in the comments down below. And obviously if you did enjoy this video, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more videos.